anymore, right? Or is he still coming? Is it still going to continue to come?
No, he's done.
That's what I thought.
It's just two classes. So, joy.
All right, ready when you are.
Good evening. Welcome to the May 14th, 2025 meeting of the Town of Southampton Conservation Board. The board's meetings continue to be hybrid, which means they are both in person and at Town Hall and via video conference through Zoom webinar. If you go to the town website and click on the town clerk's agendas and meetings portal, you can watch the live stream video of the meeting, and there is a link to submit written comments for the public record. You can also join the Zoom webinar through the town clerk's portal. If you are attending via Zoom and wish to speak during the meeting, then please alert our moderator by clicking the raise hand icon or type in the chat box. Thank you. I invite everyone to rise for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What is your pleasure on the minutes of April 23rd, 2025?
Move to accept as presented or amended?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearings, A 024038, 37 East Shore Drive LLC.
We do have affidavits of posting and mailing in compliance with the town code, so the board does have jurisdiction to open the hearing tonight.
Southampton?
Yep.
Yes, ma'am. Marty, you have a set of this? Oh, you can. Thank you very much.
Daphne Vaughn, Surfside Environmental Planning. This is very sensitive. Okay, so this application was submitted to the Environment Division on June 10th of last year. Today being May 14th, we are 11 months after the submission of our initial application. This property is located on the north side of East Shore Road and fronts on Peconic Bay. The lot is adjacent to a common access area to the Bay Beach owned by the Bayview Oaks Subdivision Association. That's located to the east of the property. The property currently contains an existing one-story single-family residence with an associated at-grade patio, some pergolas, a masonry fire pit. My office worked on a prior approval on this property back in 2017 to redevelop the property prior to the requirement of IA systems. So that project never actually came to fruition. It required a 75-foot buffer at that time for complete redevelopment with an upgraded sanitary system at that time. The prior owner had issues obtaining mortgage consent from their bank for the buffer, so he never went through with the project and ended up selling the property. So my client purchased this property now, June 23rd of 2023. Historical aerials will show some storm erosion taking place between 2018, after that last permit approval, and 2020, 2021, as well as some additional between that time and today. Part of that erosion from those storms caused some scouring out underneath an existing paver pathway, which resulted in my client constructing a temporary walkway, stairway to the beach for safe access. So the application before you right now is to restore the shoreline and beach property demarcation, let's call it, with a proposed stone and sand angled, partially submerged revetment across the north side of the property. This proposal will restore eroded grades using various sizes of stone and cobble as well as sand. The plans we submitted are identical in scope to those on the east side of the common beach access area for 43 East Shore Drive, which is one of 5 other properties located to the east of this property that have been granted approval for the exact same or highly similar plan for shoreline protection. These permits have been granted between September of 2018 and December of 2021, with the majority of the work, 4 of them, conducted and approved with certificates of wetland compliance back in 2022. So these are all very recent. 3 of the 5 approvals did not require a public hearing before this board. Only the first one, shown as number 3 on that set of photographs that I submitted to you, on page 2 or 3. I gave you a little chart. Okay, where was I? So the first one was 51 East Shore. That was approved back in 2018. And the last one, which was 43 East Shore, right across the common access, shown as number 1 from 2021 approval. But only those 2 had hearings. The other ones did not. So as I just mentioned, I passed out this little photo presentation to you. The first page shows the subject property, and you can see the erosion that took place underneath the paver path in the first photo. The second photo underneath is the view from the beach toward the residence. The third photo shows the 5 other properties that received approval. The next page shows those details of those approvals and the dates and whether or not a hearing was required, and the approval date and issuance of a certificate of wetlands compliance for completion of all of these. Yes.
Will you identify the erosion that you called under the paver?
Yeah, you can see it.
There's a staircase, and is
Yeah.
that what you're referring to?
So that staircase was constructed because of that erosion. They may have even removed a small portion of that, because I believe when I was there a year ago, it was a little more severe and kind of scary to think about walking on. So I think my client constructed that just so that there's safe access for someone to the beach without, you don't want to slide down. It doesn't look crazy in this photo, but it's steep enough that you're not going to be able to walk down it without causing disturbance or possibly hurting yourself. Okay, so then the other photos show you down the line of each of the prior approvals. You can see the first one has sand and cobble over the rock wall, and the others, it shows individually each of the rock walls that were allowed for each of them down the line. And the plans submitted for those, I gave you copies of the two that went to a public hearing. That's what this page is. And I highlighted on it, gosh, I can't open this, that the one side here is for 43 and the other side is for 51. And the details for 43 are identical to ours. Ours is just narrower in scope. There was a total of 16 feet width of rock, where ours is, I believe, 8. Okay, so our proposal shows placement of sand to be graded over the revetment with proposed planting of beach grass to help hold it all in place. The stone will be, as I just mentioned, 8 feet wide with grading over it before and after it, totaling a width of 13 feet. One thing that is not shown that I just mentioned is that he has that stairway to safely access the beach. Effectively, if this is approved, we would need to reconstruct some form of a stairway, which we would also like to request as part of our project so that there is safe egress to the beach. So Mr. Shea's report from March 19th states in it that he believes there's no imminent threat or peril to the structures by flooding or erosion, as the existing development is more than 36 feet landward of the erosion. None of the other 5 approvals suffered any structural peril at the time of their approvals. Mr. Shea suggests as an alternative to elevate the residence in lieu of protecting the shoreline, which is not necessary, nor is it practical, as the structures are not located in a FEMA flood zone. The FEMA boundary is located 6 feet landward of the most landward portion of the rocks. Actually, of the sand and the plantings, which is still about 30 feet from the closest structure being the patio. Periodic cobble and sand replenishment is also suggested in Mr. Shea's report, which means constant monitoring of the shoreline and replacement potentially annually, which is costly and difficult to maintain, both permissions and permits. Lastly, Mr. Shea suggests as a less favorable approach, in his opinion, to place scattered boulders within the area between mean high water and mean low water, which are technically not part of the metes and bounds of my client's property. So that's also not practical. So the report also references the southeast pergola and the fire pit, both present in 2017 when I was here last time, that they need to be legalized. They were proposed to be demolished at the last time, and I don't believe they were shown on the survey, but I look back at my old photos and they were both present at that time. But they weren't deemed an issue because we were proposing to get rid of everything and build a new house. So the prior owner installed, I guess after he and I surrendered on this project that he had, he installed a pergola on the north side of the house on the existing patio. The current owner would like to legalize that as part of this, as it was referenced in Marty's report. So the overall goal of this project is to maintain the property in order to protect it from further erosion in conjunction with the other previous approvals by this board for the 5 others to the east of this property. This erosion problem will continue to creep westward. as it seemingly has occurred over the past 7 years since the issuance of the first of the 5 approvals. I also submitted to you a copy of a DEC permit for this project that was issued back on October 16th. Mr. Shea did go out to the property after our submission in June. He was out there on October 29th and notified my office that a report would be forthcoming at that time. After many emails and requests for that report, one was finally issued on March 19th, which requested us to go to this hearing to discuss. So that brings us to today. Chapter 325-8A states that within 5 days of submission, that an application is supposed to be given to the chief environmental analyst, and within 30 days, he's supposed to issue some form of a response, technically to this board, in the form of a report or a notice of incomplete, with allowance for an additional 30 days. That's 65 days. We've waited 9 months for a report. That's what I have to say. Do you have any questions?
Not yet.
Good evening, I'm Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. With regards to the comments about delays in review and processing of applications, as the applicant well knows, my office does not have sufficient staff to complete these reviews more expeditiously. I put a ton of hours in. I don't take vacations. I do everything I can to move these applications along. Many of the applications that we have raise many complex issues, requiring a lot of time on my part to review. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated dated March 19, 2024. The report, consistent with much of the information that was provided by the applicant, provides a history of this property in terms of the prior Conservation Board conditional approval and the abandonment of former plans for residential redevelopment and establishment of covenanted buffers at this site. In addition to the comments that I will offer, the board should know that we did receive communications from constituents in the area. Most recently from an ex-officio of the Bayview Oaks Association, who did express concern about this application. The concerns that have been raised so far by constituents relate to a purported encroachment of the property on abutting common open space owned by the association that provides pedestrian access to the beach. In fact, one of the latest emails indicates that the association is having their property re-surveyed in order to rectify any errors in survey and monument locations. The constituents have also raised concern about the potential effects of armoring of this section of the beach. Expressed worry that armoring can actually increase erosion, result in loss of beachfront as well. Concern has also been expressed by constituents regarding the time of construction, and simply advise that in the event that this board does permit revetment construction, while they allow construction equipment to access the commonly owned beach in front of the private residence, those activities need to occur outside of the summer and early fall, so that they don't interfere with the association's use of the beach and bay area. What I'd like to hand out is some photos that my office took of the beach this April. The photos were taken April 10th. Second photo as well, someone is one of the applicant's photos that shows the subject property. The erosion at the property I would describe as somewhat minor, in that the eroded headland and escarpment is only about 1 to 2 feet high. Maximum, as is fairly evident in one of the photos that I shared with the board members. The house itself is situated at least 60 feet back from the eroded section of escarpment in the upper beach. The hardscape, some of that which needs to be legalized, is a bit closer. The house, as was indicated by the applicant, is located outside of the flood zone. The property is located along one of the only remaining stretches of natural beach in Noyak. This stretch of beach is about 1/5 of a mile long. It runs from the abutting Bayview Oaks Association Common Open Space south to the Fresh Pond Inlet. On the opposite side of the inlet, you'll see extensive bulkheading again. So when an application such as this is made for the remaining natural beach areas in Noyak, we really need to take a close look at the plans to see if the request for a permit to build rock revetment is reasonable, and whether or not it's necessary at this site. Currently, the existing residence is not at risk of erosion or flood damage, as it is situated farther back from the beach area. The mention was made of the permitted rock armoring on properties to the north of the subject property and north of the common open space area owned by the Baby Oaks Association. The site conditions were a lot more challenging to the north, and one of the reasons was that a court-ordered concrete seawall was constructed at 55 East Shore Drive. We had a pending application before this board for beach stabilization. In addition to the applicant's proposal to reconstruct a seawall, we had asked that practicable alternatives be explored in the interest of lessening potential adverse wetland impacts, including the possibility of increased beach erosion, seawater destruction, downdrift of the structure. And the applicant decided to litigate, and the courts decided that the reconstruction of a collapsed seawall should constitute a repair rather than reconstruction, and essentially ordered the building division to permit that concrete seawall without any permits from this board. Unfortunately, as anticipated, we began to see impacts from that concrete seawall, particularly downdrift impacts, resulting in much more significant erosion than you're seeing at the subject property. I recall the escarpment being a lot higher, and there was a real cause for concern among the downdrift, the immediate downdrift landowners, that court-ordered concrete seawall would continue to accelerate erosion in front of their homes. The beach condition was different. Whereas the beach at the subject property is characterized predominantly by bay cobble. That's those rounded stones that are washed up in the winter months, particularly when there's storm tides. The abutting properties to the concrete seawall, their beaches were predominantly sand. When you have high tides and erosion, beaches that are predominantly sand are a lot more vulnerable to erosion. The headlands are a lot more vulnerable to erosion as well than in the case of beaches that are predominated by bay cobble. The bay cobble actually stables particularly the upper beach. So notwithstanding that the beach is somewhat narrow, see what up this residence today. At the present time, I am seeing a beachfront that is fairly stable. The construction of a rock revetment at this property would result in loss of beach, loss of that upper beach. That's an absolutely critical ecotone area for native plants and for songbirds and other wildlife that use our bay beaches. So the building on that wall would dramatically change the natural conditions of that beach, would likely over time only accelerate erosion on this property, and is not necessarily effective in achieving the desired results. While rock can provide some stabilization in the short term, if you have a very significant storm event, the high water and waves will typically come over those rocks. And the other thing that happens is the rocks interfere with those flood tides and the recession of those flood tides. And when those flood tides come in, it can redirect the waters and the energy of that tidal surge onto abutting properties, increasing the risk of erosion and damage to adjacent properties. So when you consider whether or not to permit rock armor at a property, you not only have to factor in the risk of loss of beach and wetland impact on the subject property, but you have to consider the downdrift impacts. Much of the continuation of the approximate fifth of a mile of unarmored beach in this area is also predominated by beach cobble at present. So while I have not looked at all those individual properties, I'm not seeing a critical need for armoring the abutting lots to the south as well. My report is not supportive of constructing a rock revetment at this property because there is no emergency. The residence is not at risk. The only reason why I made mention of elevation of the home is not because I think it's necessary, but that suggestion was made for consideration because the implication of the application was that the landowner is overly concerned about risk of flood damage to the house. So notwithstanding that the house is outside of the flood zone and is well secure because of its position, the applicant could elevate that home if they yet thought the home is at risk, and as long as they approach the elevation in a reasonable way, that activity would likely be permitted. So as another thing that the applicant could do is if you look at the photos, you can see that they're maintaining a lawn right up to the eroded escarpment. Lawns are not very effective at holding the soil and stabilizing ground. What is really needed at this property is for the landowner to take up some of that lawn and to create a buffering corridor of native grasses such as switchgrass, shrubs such as groundsel. The switchgrass has very deep, thick rooting system. Beachgrass is, of course, another option, which likewise is very effective in binding the soil and holding the soil together, so that when you do get a storm tide or a storm that has some erosive effects, the beach grass, switchgrass, and other native vegetation will hold the majority of that soil. Lawn grass is a very shallow root, so if they get ever pounded by waves, they can't hold that soil. So the consequence can be collapse and loss of lawn. There is debris, some debris along that minor escarpment that needs to be cleaned up. I would recommend that the landowner bring in additional sand and cobble to reclaim that eroded edge. And what can be effective is to, in addition to the cobble beach, is to create a mound of cobble or berm of cobble in the higher portion of the beach. You'll often see that naturally occurring as a result of winter storms. The applicant needs to acknowledge that they live on a beach where there are winter beach conditions and storm beach conditions during the winter months. Particularly if we have significant storms, you would anticipate that the beach is going to narrow, that there's going to be erosion. And during the summer months, things tend to calm down and the beach will build and widen a bit. Notwithstanding the seasonal cyclic changes in beach width, I yet don't see that either the subject property or the residential improvements at this property as being at risk of storm damage or flooding, thereby necessitating drastic measures such as armoring of the beach. That being said, if conditions significantly change in the future, I'm happy to reassess the site conditions again and work with the landowner if there are better or alternate approaches that should be taken. The reason why there was also minor mentioning of a second but less preferred approach to look to get the association's approval to place widely scattered boulders, natural boulders of varying sizes on the beach and into the water. What those scattered boulders do is a much better job of breaking up the wave energy before it actually reaches that headland where it might create erosion. The danger with rock armor, even if it's angled as is proposed here, and even if it's buried in sand, there is a very high likelihood that that sand could be lost in the future. And you're still creating kind of a vertical wall. So what happens is if you do get high energy waves coming in and a strong surge, it's going to smack against that rock. And when that happens, the rock will redirect the wave energy and water energy downward, resulting in an increased likelihood of beach erosion immediately seaward of the armor than if you went with more natural restoration approaches. I have no issue with legalizing the residential improvements that were completed at the property without requisite wetland permits. I think, as I believe the applicant offered, my preference would be to see a different type of stairway, not a treated wood stairway as was built without permits at the site. But I think, again, central to legalization of the improvements at the property and long-term protection and management of this property is to create a substantial naturally vegetated buffering area as well. That would be an unfenced buffer. Again, the lawn would be taken up. There would be no allowance for reestablishment of any paver stone path going to the beach. Any pathway consistent with our standards would have to have a maximum width of 4 feet and be pervious sand. So I would be happy to work with the landowner on a more naturalized plan for their site to address their concerns, but rock armoring at the site at the present time is wholly unnecessary and would result in loss of beach, loss of that critical upper beach and headland edge with adverse impacts on wildlife, adverse impacts to use of the beach by the residents of the Bayview Oaks Association. With regards to the constituent concerns about potential encroachments of this property on the private open space and possible adjustments or corrections that need to be made to the applicant's survey, I will await the resurveying of the privately owned common open space to complete a comparative review to see if there is need for any adjustments in the applicant's survey. We do have a constituent with us from the Bayview Oaks Association that I believe is here to speak to some of the association's needs and concerns tonight. Thank you.
Marty, do you have any photos to substantiate your kind of comments about there being damage to the beach or erosion to the beaches in areas where the rock revetments were previously already approved?
Well, I could, certainly search the records, see what we have on file for that. I don't have photos with me tonight. We were not only concerned about the erosion that was occurring. We also observed, my recollection is that we observed that the beach area that was being impacted was more sand as opposed to cobble. Layered beach is a lot more stable. And the permitting, I would say, was somewhat of a response to the concerns about the long-term impacts of the court-ordered concrete seawall. This property is located much further south of that court-ordered seawall. It also abuts a privately owned common beach that is very stable right now. So it's separated from the nearest property that is owned by a stable beach. So I think the conditions are different than what I recall further to the.
Marty, the
Properties that are north of the subject property, you're saying that those are sandy beaches, and so that went into your consideration for why you would give a permit?
I believe that was, I recall that was part of my consideration as far as the possible risk of erosion, downdrift erosion from.
Because from the photographs that Daphne submitted, those beaches look like they're all cobble.
Well, they're not all cobble today, as my report speaks to. There's less cobble. And I don't recall there being a lot of cobble when the rock armoring was permitted on those northerly properties. Properties were, a lot closer to that vertical concrete wall. Particularly when you have a vertical solid wall, the risk of impact, downdrift, immediately downdrift, and seaward of that wall is great. So I think we were concerned not only regarding the conditions as observed during that time, but the risk of erosion down the road. But beyond that, I would have to pull all those records and share those records with you, and I'd be happy to do that if the board is so interested. So the conditions today, they are cobble and sand to the north, where that armor is, but as described by my report, they don't have as much cobble as you see in front of this the subject property. So the cobble that you're seeing in these photos is most beneficial in terms of stabilizing the area. I just, at this time, I think the conditions are fairly stable. I don't see that there's immediate need to consider such drastic measures, such as rock armoring. Thank you.
So the one thing that you can see in all of my photos, which were taken on April 30th, is the rack line, which is showing you basically the high water mark. And if you notice, in front of every rock revetment that has been approved, the rack line is, I don't want to say significantly, but it's in front of it by at least a few feet. So the purpose of this wall, let's call it, is, as I said earlier, to maintain that existing edge that they've already lost some square footage from of the actual property versus the beach. It would be put at an angle to try to alleviate some wave action when it does hit it, but it would also be covered in the sand and cobble and then planted with beach grass on top to try to hold that as much as possible. And if that is planted at the right time, that the roots of the beach grass would be allowed to actually take, they should effectively hold it during the majority of the year. The whole purpose behind this is mostly, as Marty indicated, during the winter months when you're going to see the bigger storms and wave action that's actually eroding the property during these storm events. you can even see in Marty's photos that he submitted to you, the rack line in front of the property. This is actually a nice photo because it shows you the eroded vegetation that was at the seaward end of the property, which was Montauk daisies, to my recollection, which is not native. I've been coming to this shoreline for 24 years in a number of capacities and been to many of these properties multiple times throughout the years. This is not necessarily a big natural vegetation shoreline. It's basically people's properties, a couple of ornamental things here and there with some native plants, and then the cobble and sand beach. So what I'm saying is that what we're proposing would be essentially in that location of the stairway. It would be that width going into the property landward by approximately 8 feet with the rocks, and then 2.5 feet on either side of sand to mound over it. And then our objective would be to build a new non-treated wood staircase over it for safe passage to prevent erosion from humans to access the beach safely. As far as any encroachments into the common area, it's my understanding from the owner that Squires and Holden had gone out to redo the survey more recently, because the meets and bounds, to my knowledge, on the northwestern side, I guess we'll call it, being the bayfront, were not accurate. That mean high water is not the meets and bounds of this property. It's actually landward of that. And it's about maybe 5 feet seaward of the edge of the stairway that my client constructed. But otherwise, I don't see any structural encroachments into that common area. I'm sure that the constituent can address that. But otherwise, you can see in the photos that Marty submitted some failed hay bales that my clients had utilized at one point. And in the other photo, you see that those hay bales were placed to the next property, to the, I guess we're calling it south, in a much more, what do I want to say, regular, like piled, constructed way. But all of these things are on the landward side of the high water mark. So effectively, they would not be hit regularly by tides during the majority of the year. This is mainly for storm protection, which is what everyone else had requested in these past 5 approvals that this board granted. Some of those properties are a little steeper. The properties further, I don't know what direction I'm talking about, further north, I guess we'll say, beyond the ones that were armored with rock, are bulkheaded and have been bulkheaded forever. So those come from a higher elevation, where then things came lower, and yes, that concrete wall was existing in prior years and then was allowed to be repaired, I guess we'll call. But that received a certificate of compliance in January of 2019, which is still after the issuance of the first permit for the armoring at 51 East Shore, which is right next to that wall. So I wouldn't say that the need for these permits was specifically because of that wall, because they were all issued either before or right around the time of that wall being reconstructed. What else? So although the structures are not in imminent peril, as I mentioned, no one's structures were in imminent peril. If you look at the aerial, if it was pulled out a little bit, nearly all these houses are in line with each other. Some of them that are a little closer, still, when there was erosion in front of those, it was not immediately in front of their structures. So none of them had any structural peril at the time of the approval of the rocks. But there was a need for it to maintain their property. That's all that we're seeking, is maintenance of the actual property that was there and has been taken away through some form of armoring. And as you can see, this is just going to keep going straight down the line. So the guy next to our property has a significant amount of hay bales that he keeps putting in to try to stop this. They deteriorate. Eventually, he's going to come in and probably ask you for the same thing. And then it's going to go down and down and down until you end up reaching that bulkhead that's at the end of the beach to enter Fresh Pond. Yeah, so that shows nicely from this property to the east. And each of those properties have some form of erosion issue. And either you have seen them or may see them in the future. This is not a short-term fix situation. This is a recurring issue that is causing damage, not necessarily to structures, but eventually could cause damage to structures. Is sand replenishment an answer? It's a short-term fix. We're looking for something that is in keeping with what was approved for the other properties and would provide a more longer-term fix. If you look closely at the photos that I submitted, where Marty was talking about scouring in front of the rocks, I don't see any evidence of that in any of these, and they've all been there for at least 3 or 4 years. Because they're landward of that typical high water mark where the rack line is.
Okay.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst. Just a couple of quick comments. Notwithstanding now, we may not be observing significant scouring in front of the rock armor to the north. There's no need to armor this beach right now. The wetlands law is all about protecting wetlands, beaches, bay beaches in their natural state. Any radical change like this destroys and adversely impacts that natural habitat. If we had a residence that was right on the edge of an escarpment, we might look at this differently. I am concerned about the domino effect. If a revetment is permitted in this location, where, based on my assessment, it's not necessary, we are going to get applications from additional landowners along this remaining fifth of a mile of natural beach. And the end consequence of that may be that you're going to lose this whole section of unarmored beach. So there is no emergency at present that would dictate this radical change. The other comment I wanted to offer is that in the case of the court-ordered seawall, remember that there was a prior seawall there. The walls started getting damaged. I had met with the landowner and her marine contract to give them guidance on repairing small sections of that wall. And then what happened after successive storms, the wall collapsed. And that's when an application was made to this board, and we said, we're concerned about the impacts of rebuilding a vertical seawall at this property. As required by Chapter 325, you need to look at practicable alternative, softer solutions. And although I think we opened the first hearing, rather than work with us, the landowner decided to bypass us. I believe they filed in Article 78 and went to court. And the court overruled this board, did not give this board the opportunity to weigh in on that reconstruction of that wall, and directed the chief building inspector to allow them to build a new wall. So we already had a wall there that was having some impact, and that may have been a factor in any permitting of stone on the immediate abutting property, if indeed that occurred prior to construction of the new wall. Thank you.
Is there someone in the public who'd like to speak on this application? Yes, sir.
Very interesting to live in a place and hear it be discussed like this. I'm Daniel Sheridan,
Okay.
and I'm from Bayview Oaks, just finished a term as its president, and I remain the main treasurer and the one who handles contracts and money and bills and everything about Bayview Oaks. And I've been part of all of these rock revetments that have taken place. So I know the history before the erosion occurred, what we're watching now, and to everybody I say, you're right and you're wrong. We're dealing with Mother Nature, a guessing game of the impact of what's occurring. My purpose really to come tonight, I've been into Marty's office this past week about something completely different. It was about what you had referenced, the survey that Bayview Oaks does every 10 years. So it's not about this project in particular, but on April 30th, we began, as we, in a normal pattern of repeated surveys of Bayview Oaks and its beaches and properties. So that occurred, and so you pull out old maps, and I pulled out the 2015, and that's where I saw different things in the right-of-way, not big, but just some changes, and I mentioned to Marty, something's different here. It's a difficult place to do a survey because of the history of the things that have been there, where people, when they leave stuff in the ground behind. And so is this new, old, or back from when, where the survey lines are going to begin? It's more complicated by the owner, prior to the owner you're representing, did many things on his own, where in the night you discovered things. So we sort of know the comments you've made, where they're coming from.
Yeah, you have to address us, I'm sorry.
Direct
Yes.
your comments to the board, please.
Yes. And so the concern for Bayview Oaks part is the beach in front of this house and the common areas. We have two common right-of-ways to get to the beach are deeded private property of Bayview Oaks. So very unusual that the beach itself is deeded private property for 865 feet. And so because of that, any of these revetments required Bayview Oaks to give permission, once this board gave permission, for when people could bring equipment in on the beach, and that the association's beach wasn't taken away from the residents in the summertime, but that we created a window of when work could occur, and that contractors be responsible to put everything back into usable condition for the next season. So that is occurring for what we're talking about now with this house. In terms of the reactions, if you had a great picture there of our main common right-of-way, if that could be brought back up, it really shows what's happening in a very good way. Because in the common right-of-way now is the float, the swimming float for Bayview Oaks. And where it is stored, that square object in the right-of-way, it's stored that far back from the beach because you can see sand between it and the beach. That's how high up sand has come in storms this past winter. And this winter was not very rough. So a lot of movement of water keeps occurring and the shoreline changing. So for the house you're discussing now, the whole front yard disappeared about 8 feet from what used to be present for that yard. And the same on the other side of the right-of-way, that person's yard. There used to be a picket fence there in set measured sections. And so 8 feet gone, and so we know the distance. That repair on the east of our common right-of-way did not do a rock revetment, but is doing other treatment with sand. It's less aggressive, the sand, the seagrasses, and that seems to be working and be more gentle to our common right-of-way. And so our hope was with the other side, something like that would also occur where the grasses and it's a fabric that's placed underneath and rocks on that, and then as was presented here, that it takes maintenance. The owner every 2 years has the company that built that inspect it and do whatever repairs might be needed. And Bayview Oaks also for our right-of-way, the company asked, should we look at your place too? And we agreed that every other year, just see if it's washing away or not. Do we need to do anything more? We like for the Bayview Oaks right-of-way the way it is, not having these large projects around it. It seems to be holding that it's not washing away and becoming that we need steps to go down on the beach. We'd like it as long as possible to be a parcel of land that you can come and go without having that problem that steps represent. So for this project, if approved, what I would need to present for the people involved is just our part of here's how you get our permission to do your job using Bayview Oaks property. This house and then moving east, that common part, the next house is in Bayview Oaks on the Bayview Oaks beach. The third house is in Bayview Oaks, but on state property now. So the beaches after that become New York State beach property. So the wall you're talking about, the seawall, is a growth out of the original seawall was probably 30 inches high out of the ground. Bayview Oaks had a similar one for our other right-of-way. The aggressive nor'easter storms did the erosion you see today, where at least 8 feet of ground or more is just gone, and these giant rock revetment solutions were being tried out. All of the rock revetments, when you look at them, as a local, we sort of laugh looking at them, all of them were covered in sand. They were all owners complied with the request. You don't see any sand on any of them. Mother Nature said, no sand here, that's gone. Grass up on the ground level behind them, the grasses seem to be taken. So that is a good thing to keep trying to have work there. And for this solution now to get rid of the beautiful green lawn and put seagrasses in there, I think would be good to continue that pattern seems to be working. So any questions for me as the local? Okay, good.
Thank you.
Your presentation was very good.
Any questions by any board member? I'd like to just summarize what we've heard here and let's work towards the next step. And it seems like there is general agreement, there is very limited erosion. It also seems like there's agreement that there are several houses to the north that also have similar rock revetments as the applicant wishes to construct. this last speaker said that when constructed, all these revetments had sand over them. Now there isn't. Not real surprising because that moves away first. The cobble may be the result of erosion of the sand, leaving a larger cobble behind, which is more resistant to erosion. And I don't think any of these houses are in peril from the pictures and from what we've heard. So the benefit of a rock revetment on this property or some protection of this property would be more for the protection when there is a storm event than on an everyday occurrence, like on some applications we see. Which means that a rock revetment here will have little function and little impact. So on the one hand, it probably doesn't make much difference whether we approve it or not, because the water's not going to reach there unless there's going to be a big storm event. But in general, we don't like to see hardened structures on shores because in principle, over time, it does remove the beach. Is there a way? Is there a way that your client would be willing to look at an alternative, perhaps similar to what Marty suggested, of rather than a more engineered structure as these rocks in what your drawings show, but rather some staggering pattern of rocks seaward of where between the low and a high water line.
That's not possible
It's not
because
their
it's not
property.
our property. It's their property.
I understand that. However, what is the relationship between your client and Bayview Oaks, the owner of it? Have you approached them to see if they'd be willing for you to put rocks on their property?
No, we have not. Knowing
I think that's
the
a little
residents
much.
of this area, I can't imagine them being super excited for something like that. They treasure this beach. He just said, they have the swim float. People utilize this beach regularly. This is the whole reason you live in Bayview Oaks, so that you have that access to that beautiful view and beautiful beach. So I can't see them wanting to have stones impeding access for walking or just general enjoyment for little kids to potentially get hurt on. I can't see that as something they'd be jumping for joy about.
The sales pitch would be that typically when there's a hardened structure on the shoreline, it's only a matter of time before the beach disappears. So the sales
The
pitch
beach hasn't
is,
truly disappeared in any of the properties.
so the sales pitch is that the rocks between the low and the high water line doesn't remove the beach, it keeps the beach.
Well, if that's the case, then that should have been done further up the beach instead of what they were granted.
That may be correct.
So it's kind of like the walls began coming in. And I would say again that 43, the one that is closest to us, the plan that we submitted is identical to their plan. And they're 150 feet away. This beach, the high beach, as you can see in my photos, is all pretty much cobble. It gets a little sandier on those more northeasterly areas.
I'm actually more concerned about the ones to the south.
Yeah, so those are, as you saw in Marty's photo, largely comprised of more cobble than sand right now. However, as the gentleman noted, there's about 8 feet of property that has been taken off of this guy's lot. It's happening to the southwest. That's why he's got those hay bales constructed. I know I've heard from older clients of mine further down the line that they're having issues and what can they do. So this is not going to be an issue that's going to.
We have to make a decision on your application, but I'm also thinking the domino effect. We already have other applications down the line. How are we going to transition to something different that's going to allow for the beach to stay longer term?
Well, I'll say it again. Out of those 5 applications that were approved, only 2 of them went to a public hearing. 3 of them were just approved without any discussion. It was just, here's your permit, have a great day.
I wonder whether or not that's actually not the issue before us, right? I mean, those were decisions made, between 2018 and 2021. We have to decide on this application and its applicability to the wetlands law.
But it is a precedent.
I don't think, based on her testimony and the right of the applicant to be able to maintain the edge of their property, even if the house isn't in peril, the edge of their property is. I don't think that, based on the other approvals before it, I don't think that this is unreasonable, and I'm supporting her plan personally.
All right.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. One of the reasons that you see hay bales on the beachfront of some of the properties in this stretch of on the beach is years ago we had a particularly strong nor'easter approaching. And prior and in the midst of that storm, I was contacted by at least 1, perhaps 2 landowners who were very concerned about the high waves, very concerned about whether or not their properties would be significantly eroded or damaged. And there was not enough time to get a lot of beach cobble or sand to place that down to defend those properties. So what I had actually offered as last resort, while that storm was approaching and while the storm was underway, that they could stake a line of temporary hay bales along their escarpment. And that those hay bales, I think I initially said they could remain in place for the duration of the storm. And then I may have said for the duration of those winter months in order to soften the impact of the surge and waves. And to a large degree, it was very effective as a temporary measure. So in this case, consideration could be given to a similar approach, that perhaps in the winter months or prior to predictions of a significant storm event, the landowner could be allowed to stake a temporary line, perhaps 2 lines of hay bales to get them through that storm. And if it's particularly rough winter, to get them through the remainder of that winter, when then those hay bales can be taken out because the summer is a calmer period. And what that does is it allays their fears. It gets them through the worst of the storm when there may be a need for something, a stronger line of defense. And then the beach is restored back to its natural state by removal of those hay bales after the storm event or the winter period is over. A similar could be a similar approach. The permit could be written so that it would allow them to temporarily stake a hay bale line if there's a tropical storm or there's a hurricane event, to get them through that period when they may be at the greatest risk, and when their fears and concerns may be the greatest. And, it's been a while, but when that was done, the landowners at that time were quite satisfied that I was willing to get them through the storm event and offer a temporary measure that would provide for some protection. So, consideration could be given to a similar approach to allow for temporary staking of hay bale lines when their properties are at greater stress. The other thing that needs to happen here, though, these landowners need to work with us. They, rather, as was mentioned by the Bayview Oaks Association, perhaps rather than continue to maintain an expanse of shallow rooted lawn on this property, the landowner should beach grass their property seaward of the improvements. That'll offer some additional protection. But, they need to be better stewards of their property, and they need to manage their property better. In the event that there is still a need, even with perhaps some additional cobble placement and sand placement, in the event that there is still a need for a stairway, of course I'll permit a stairway. Typically my preference is for a light penetrable stairway, so that if there is an opportunity for vegetation to grow beneath that stairway, it has a better chance of growing and stabilizing the area. Because when you have wood-decked stairways along eroded beaches, it typically creates a gully or a channel of erosion under that structure. So I think we need to be creative here. Listening to the applicant, understanding the landowner's concerns. But I just don't think there's any need to be so aggressive right now as far as dramatically changing that beach. You change this beach, you're going to set a precedent for that remaining stretch of natural beach from the Bayview Oaks common beach access all the way down to the inlet. Do we really want to see that entire beach armored? Is that what Chapter 325 is all about? I don't think so. I think Chapter 325 is all about giving due considerations to practicable alternatives, being creative in your approaches so that you can go with the least environmentally damaging approach. The revetment results in a loss of wetlands and a loss of beach forever. So I think that needs to be considered. So I think there's a need to be a little bit more creative about how we approach these situations. Thank you.
I think Marty's last statement that this would result in a loss of the beach forever should have then been considered for the other properties. Hay bales to me are not an answer to this. Who wants to look at hay bales? I don't think anyone. Farmers probably don't even want to look at hay bales. This is the Hamptons. There's a standard to living here. People pay exorbitant amounts of money to live here. They don't want to look at hay bales in front of their property. It's not what this place is about. I mean, yeah, sure, that's a temporary fix. There, I don't know. Light penetrable, non-treated stairway is not an issue. That is totally fine. We are proposing beach grass to be planted over the entire structure of the angled rocks. I can't say that the other people's rocks are angled. If you look at the photos, those are
They're
pretty
very
vertical.
Very vertical.
We're proposing an angle to alleviate wave action. That's what is supposed to have been done at least on 51 and 43. On 43, it may be that way because it's buried right now with the cobble, but I don't think it's that way for 51. The other ones are seemingly very vertical, or they're stacked and then stacked back, but the rocks are larger than what we're proposing. We're not proposing a huge rock wall. We're proposing something smaller that then tapers back and is smaller and smaller as you go back, with cobble underneath and over it to try to maintain that edge of the property. Like I said, we're planting over the whole entire structure. Some of these properties had additional plantings landward, but mainly because they had buffers that were required for prior projects. Like I know at 43, that whole house was reconstructed. They had a larger buffer that was required back in the late 90s. Some of the other ones had 30, 40-foot buffers that were required for pool projects or additions. I know a lot of these properties because I worked on them. So at this point, I guess I would like to understand where the board is.
I would just like to.
Going back and forth, it's an hour and a half.
Let me, yeah, we gotta,
We gotta move on.
I'll be extremely brief, I promise.
all right.
Put the timer on.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst. I was not for a moment suggesting that people look at a wall of hay bales all year round. They would never be necessary during the summer. They wouldn't even be necessary during the majority of the winter month. I'm just offering that as a last resort measure. Most of these landowners don't even use their homes in the winter months.
All right.
So it would just be a short-term measure if they thought some additional protection was warranted. Thank you.
Let's pull this together. We've heard important, significant comments on both sides of the issue, and the answer is not leaking out as a common thing that we all are gravitating towards. I'm interested if anybody who has not spoken has anything to say.
I do. I agree with Tom. The applicant has lost a fee. And we should look not just if the house is being threatened, but also if the property is being threatened. So that is an issue to me. But then at the same time, I know it can have a domino effect. But that should have been addressed before. So what I'm saying is I'm really kind of in the middle. You know, I'm not for just, rejecting it. But I do think we have an obligation to look at the loss of land, because once that land is gone, that's gone. So are we going to wait till the house is now being threatened and then allow a hardening structure to go there? So that doesn't probably, answer
Well,
completely,
it's-
but I'm in the middle
another
because
point.
there's, two sides to it.
See, part of me says, let's not do this now, let's wait for something to happen. One of the problems with that idea, though, is that erosion does not happen systematically, evenly, predictably. It often happens maybe once every several years, maybe once a decade, maybe longer than that. I'm just throwing out numbers. The point is that we could have a series of winters where there's no erosion and then get a humdinger. And when you get a humdinger, something much stronger is needed, and then there is no recovering. So, by the same token, that erosion can happen over a certain heavy winter of storms. So we may not see erosion right now from those who were installed 6, 7 years ago. But in another few years, we may see a serious erosion. But here's the problem. It seems to me that it's inevitable that a hardened shore structure will cause the beach to be lost over some amount of time. Whether it's another 5 years, whether it's another lifetime or two, I don't know. But the principle is that erosion by the shore is what nourishes beaches. And when we prevent all erosion from the shore, then we're looking at ourselves right now in this time frame as the beneficiaries, and every succeeding generation is going to lose. What do we do now? Do we think of ourselves right now? Do we think of the future and all the impacts in another 10, 20, 50, 100 years? I've never seen, when these structures go in, I've never seen an applicant come in here and say, hey, we want to take it out. So it's a one-time thing. And I'm leaning towards saying either don't put it in or come up with some system that's going to allow for some dissipation of the wave energy without causing scouring on a heavy storm event. Any other thoughts?
Well, I have I like to walk Long Beach quite a bit, and they have an enormous amount of beach plum plants down there, and they seem to work. I'm not sympathetic to to the applicant's situation, Daphne. I would like to see an attempt of some heavy planting, not beach grass alone, but some heavy planting along with beach grass, backfilled, and possibly the use of hay bales during the winter, and see what happens in a season or two. And if it continues, then I would definitely say, let's put something in there. But I saw too much happen in Pine Neck with any kind of structures that they put up. There's a whole community, Sunset Shores, that lost an enormous, just by the time I'm out here. I'm only out here 40 years. And when I first came out here, they had 30 feet of beach. They don't have anything anymore. And we have sections of Pine Neck down by the waterside, they're gone because of bulkheading. And when I first came out here, you could walk that at high tide. You can't do that anymore. You can't even do it at low tide. It's my natural aversion to a rock, any kind of rock structure on the beach, that leads me to ask you to consider doing some heavy planting and see how that works out. And in the event it does, as Harry said, once you put those rocks in, they're not coming out. So I would rather make an error in terms of giving it an attempt with the planting to see if that works. And if that doesn't work, then absolutely, you got my vote to put in a rock abutment.
Well, we submitted this application a year ago to get to you to have this conversation. 11 months.
Well, I don't
To
know.
get here.
I don't know how to respond to that. I'm trying to respond. We've been at this for an hour and a half.
No, I get it.
So I'm trying to respond to the situation that's going on now. And as much as I appreciate your situation and your applicants appreciate a situation, I think it's worth a shot to do some heavy planting. I don't mean it just a couple of, sprouts of beach grass.
So what are you talking about? 20 feet, 10 feet, 30 feet? I don't know what heavy planting would be considered.
What I mean by heavy planting, I mean a heavy plant, something with substance. Beach grass, to me, doesn't have that kind of substance. It may help, but to really stop erosion, I think you need something substantial to be planted there. At least try it.
Well, obviously, I would have to have a discussion with my client.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I don't think he was going to be in favor of it, but I can certainly have that conversation.
If there's going to be any requirement for planting there, her plan was going to allow for the rocks with the sand over it to almost regain that 8 feet that was lost from erosion because the grass would be over it. Their property line would have been almost brought back to an area where it was before it was eroded. If they're going to be asked to plant, are they going to be allowed to bring in sand and fill in or any kind of fill
I would agree to that,
bring that in,
absolutely.
plant over that? Because otherwise they've permanently lost that 8 feet, and I don't think that's
I'm in
fair
total-
to a
if you're
homeowner
gonna
at
do
all.
planting, I'm in total agreement with whatever you want to do.
Because the planting plan would also have to involve fill of
Yes,
sand
I
and
agree with
whatever
that. And
material
backfill,
that
maybe.
would, yeah, that's what I
And
mean.
maybe backfill.
Marty, word of advice on this idea of planting and backfilling. Do you see any barriers in our system or laws that would prevent that from happening?
Well, I'm hearing two different things being touched upon. One is that the applicant has over the place sand and beach grass atop of the revetment.
No,
Highly unlikely
no,
that
no.
sand's going to
What-
remain.
No,
in
let
that
me,
beach
let me
grass.
clarify the question. If we look at George's suggestion of he calls it a heavy planting, we can define that at some point.
Yes.
But if there's a heavy planting, and that would be planting that would be, I'm visualizing something that would go, perhaps the entire span of the staircase as just as a reference, which perhaps would need some fillings under it to elevate it. But would we be able to permit filling that area and planting, he suggested beach grass, not beach grass, beach plum. There may be other plants that would do well too. The characteristics should be something that has a root system that tends to hold soil
There you go.
and a deep root system, much deeper than what beach grass would provide. Phragmites is great, but you don't want Phragmites. But something that is aggressive like that can take hold and flourish. And how can we create an environment for that to happen?
I would just hope that you need to plant a wider area. You can't just look to place sand and right along that escarpment and just plant that. That's not going to be sufficient. You need to extend the planted area
How
further
wide?
back into the property.
How wide an area?
Well, I don't know. I'd have to take the time to take another look at the site conditions, see what makes sense. But it can't just be a narrow strip right at that escarpment. You need more than that.
Well, I'm trying to get a sense of whether we're talking about 10 feet being a narrow strip or 30 feet being a narrow strip. But give me some
Right
range.
now, they're maintaining most of the seaward side of that property as shallow rooted lawn. A lawn is never going to hold the property of the soil if you get high water events.
My suggestion would be to start where the property extended before the erosion, start at a planting plan there, and plant backward to the.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that, but I would have to reassess the site conditions and decide what I think is going to work and what would be reasonable. And I'm happy to do that. In fact, those activities could even be permitted separately by administrative wetlands permit. They don't necessarily need to be authorized by this board.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I would have to
My
look at
question
the-
has been answered sufficiently for now.
And,
So,
I'm sorry, and if it did become successful, okay, it might be an example for the rest of the homeowners to follow through on that.
Yeah, and it might even, we might even, as an alternate approach, look for some scattered boulders in among that vegetation as well. But I would have to look at those. Yeah, I think we need to think in terms of the entirety of this
Yeah, I think the beach
remaining
ones, I've
stretch
seen
of
on the
natural
dunes
beach
in Guam
and come up
my whole life,
with an
since I've been a
approach
child,
that'll
it
work well
works. So
consistently
his,
Yeah.
you know,
for these
suggestion
properties.
is very good.
So I
It's
would
deep. It
not
works.
only like to reassess the site conditions at sub property, but look at the other
It's going-
properties
it's
south
going-
of that.
The plantings with the beach ones.
So maybe we could
And
adjourn
look at what
this.
our options are. Look at whether or not that approach is likely to be effective.
Okay, so maybe we could adjourn this with some time so you could speak to your client and Marty could reassess.
More than 2 weeks.
Well,
I think we need
it's
to
so
be fair
long for
and do
her. You
it.
think we could give her a break if she doesn't need 2 weeks?
well, what do we got?
I just want to remind you all that I do have a permit since October 16th from New York State DEC for this project as proposed. I don't really know what to say right now.
Well, here's the problem. We don't have an agreement on this board to give you a permit to do what you want to do. So there's one problem. We're not going to get it done tonight. We're going to
Right.
adjourn this for 1 month till June 11th. In that time, I'm going to ask if you go to your client and you do some work, some homework, to see what planting, what density, what placement, what stretch, how wide a stretch you can do that might be effective to be in place of the rock revetment. We're resisting doing rock revetment here and on the future applications because we don't like them. We have to find an alternative.
You don't like them, but 5 of them have been approved. This is very confusing to me.
Okay, I understand it's confusing, I understand we've done that, and I understand that it doesn't make any sense. I agree. I think if we had all this look at again, we might look at it differently. I'm not particularly happy with what I see happening up there in those applications that you took pictures of. But that's water over the dam. What I'm looking for is that rest of that line of dominoes to fall over. And I feel we're on the precipice right now. And if we bend on this one, I don't know how we can stop it. Because every time, we're gonna have the same thing. You did it there, now what?
June 11th?
June 11th.
I can do that.
This is under the heading in the code of exploring alternatives. We're searching for something that will meet the needs of your client and also honor the purpose and position of chapter 325.
Okay.
I suspect there's something that'll work, but you guys have more experience on that than we do, so we need to do some homework on that. Is there a motion to adjourn till June 11th?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed?
And go like that.
Unless you want to keep them.
A024056, Crypto Avenue LLC.
This is another new public hearing. We do have affidavits of posting and mailing in compliance with the town code, and the board does have jurisdiction to open the hearing.
What? Yeah, see, 'cause it could be, yeah. we have-
Sorry.
That wasn't a quick decision. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, Tom, sorry. This is Leslie. You gotta take that.
Yeah, I'm a little new to figure out what I need to pass down the line.
Good evening. My name is Young Yoon with Yoon's Group, Codair Architectural Division. Excuse me. So I'm here on behalf of the owners, Shorovis. The property currently has a single-family, 1.5-story house on it. We're proposing to build a two-story frame dwelling on the existing foundation and new foundation, while relocating the existing pool landwards of the wetland and the water. With the replacement of the pool equipment, pump and filtration, the existing chlorine-based pool that's there is fully functional. We did discover that there are no dry wells connected to the dry wells for any drainage or overflows. Through multiple negotiations with the Department of Environmental Conservation, the owners have agreed to relocate the pool and revegetate a portion of the lot towards the back, relocating the pool landward of the water and wetland. And we also agreed to provide dry wells away from the wetland and relocate the septic systems further away from the wetland. And this is an approval that we did get from the DEC. And then from the main body of the revegetated wetland, we're proposing the in-ground pool to be roughly 120 feet, which is approximately 204 feet from the water. The pool and the pool patio that was dilapidated and removed were inches from the revegetated wetland area, and the pool will be using mineral water, which would have at least the least amount of impact on the natural environment. And we would provide dry wells and for drainage and overflow. The house will be 137.08 feet from the revegetated wetland area, and 246 feet from the water, in comparison to the existing home that we're going to partially demo. That is 127.33 feet from the revegetated wetland. Therefore, the proposed house is now set about 10 feet further landwards. The reason why I'm bringing up the revegetation is the owners were cleaning up the property by removing unsafe and hazardous construction materials that was on the site, debris that was left on the site, dilapidated chain link fence, trash and garbage around their entire property. He was maintaining the lawn, or what he believed he thought it was his lawn that was within, for any owner that, he recently purchased this property, he assumed that anything within the chain link fence was his property that wasn't part of the wetland. He thought it was part of the grass. So he was mowing the lawn, maintaining it, grooming it, just like it's been done. If you look at the satellite photos, it's been done for the last 20, 30 years, that whole area within the chain link fence was always being maintained. With that, with all that maintenance happening, the owner removed the pool patio and the deck behind the house, and then in doing so, he was filling in the empty spaces. He was tilling up the land there to plant new grass. when Marty came and stopped the job and said, "Hey, you actually need a wetland permit here." So, excuse me. So, with that, so with that, we had we had a topography survey, an existing topography survey. With all the work that was being done, Marty did ask us to provide a new topography survey, which was completed, which will indicate that there was almost minimal grade changes, almost very nominal, and in comparison with the existing and the new survey that was completed by a licensed surveyor, Warbrooks. Our proposed house that we have, the house will not be closer to the water than the neighbors to the south. The area that Marty is measuring, his distance from the wetland is to on the south side is no wider than 3 to 4 feet. By revegetating a larger area and towards the main body of the wetland area, towards the water, this will protect the homes and the neighborhoods from any future storm surges and erosions. This was a conversation that we had with the DEC, and this was something that they were in favor of. The 3 foot wide wetland area really would serve almost no purpose as far as controlling erosions or protecting the properties because it's a really narrow strip. As I mentioned, the DEC has already approved our plans to revegetate roughly 1,500 square feet landward of where the current wetland is, with the state approved, and we'll work with Marty as well in terms of what plants to plant there. And they were okay with they approved the location of the home, the in-ground pool, and the updated septic systems. They did like that we were proposing to install dry wells throughout the property to address any water runoff. And the DEC did appreciate that the fact that the owners were willing to take on the expense of relocating the pool, which they said was grandfathered in as long, and they appreciated the fact that we were willing to bring it further away from the wetlands. The owners are trying to create a safe and beautiful environment for their family, as you would find with most homes in this area. I did, when Marty sent that, the advisory, we did send a rebuttal. I'm not sure if you did receive it, but I do have a copy here.
That has to be stamped in by the secretary. Okay.
Excuse me, when was that submitted? That was submitted after my advisory.
It was
Because we didn't get anything.
It was submitted through the online portal. Like it said, if you had any comments or anything, you had to submit it on the website. You had to click a link.
I don't even had to check the website for comments. The report should have been emailed to us.
It's stamped received, but it's not dated when you actually wrote it.
Right.
It's stamped received on May 14th, but not.
That's just today.
That's just today. There's nothing that even says when you wrote it.
Okay. But there is it's not this hearing that I believe it was.
So you just submitted this?
No. This this is a printed version. But on March 26th, which was the last hearing that to the preliminary, I guess was the preliminary hearing to determine that we were going to have a public hearing for this case. There was an option on the portal on the website that you submit documents, and that's where I did submit it. And then we did get an email. I don't remember who I got the email from saying that we wouldn't actually be permitted to speak at that hearing, but we would have
an email. That's several copies of an email from Karina that says, "Please be advised that public comments are not allowed during the preliminary review. A public hearing is scheduled for May 14th. At such time, you'll be able to present your application and comments."
Right, and with that, had the attachment of this rebuttal. Regardless, this was addressing a lot of the comments that Marty Shea had in his advisory report, of which, it's, Marty states that we're building a new home, but the truth is we're not building a new home. We're actually going to be keeping the existing foundation and building framing a two-story house, in addition to adding piles and foundation to it. The house,
We look at that as like a new.
That's a new home.
which is understandable. But there is a good portion of the existing foundation that the homeowner is going to be keeping, so that he doesn't have to incur the cost of.
Yeah, we still consider that to be a new.
I understand. Right. And then there was we do want to bring up a point that prior to purchasing this lot, the homeowner did go down to the building department, did have an expediter look into this property, and in all the title searches and everything, did not find any violations or any issues with this property, which is why he purchased this property. And then it was later on he's finding out, wait, there were these violations. All he was told was there was previous permits that were approved in the past, and he was under the assumption that he was going to be able to build the home that he wanted. He didn't know that even in the past violation, that portion of this lot had to be revegetated, and we found out that information through talking with the DEC. And then
You said he had an expediter?
yes, we were using expediter, and then she disappeared. The homeowner paid her, and then
During this entire process, he had no idea that there were wetlands on the property?
no, he knew there was a wetland. He understood that there was a wetland, but within the fenced area, because there was a chain link fence that was kind of falling apart, he was under the assumption that anything within that chain link fence was his property, and that it was not part of the wetland, that he was able to, because people were mowing the lawn. They were they had a landscaper. The property, from what I understand, was abandoned for quite some time, and the previous owner was sending landscapers there to keep the property maintained, mowing the lawn and stuff like that, specifically around the pool. And with that, it was his assumption that that wasn't part of the wetland, and he was later finding out, that was part of the wetland. When he tilled up the dirt because he wanted to plant really nice green grass and that whole 9 yards, he didn't know that was part of the wetland that was within the chain link. He wasn't touching anything beyond the chain link fence where it was obvious wetland, right? You saw the long, tall, grass that was growing in there. Oftentimes it was matted down, but you also saw water come in and out, and he wasn't touching that area. It was really the area that he believed was his lawn.
Well, between the title company and the expediter and the attorney, this should have all been known by your client. What the restrictions would have been, or what law would have restricted them from doing anything more than whatever.
Right. So I'm not disagreeing with you.
We have a lot of work to do on this application.
Yes.
All right. Okay. I beg your pardon. Please.
No problem. So, as mentioned, just so you know, there are cameras installed all over the property, so he is aware of all activities that's happening on the property. And we just want to note that Marty claimed that he visited the site on October 24th, and he was going to do a shovel probe and see how much dirt we brought in and stuff, but there was no indication of him actually visiting the site. We went back, he has every record, and he kept every record of the videos in doing so. But that being said, we still provided the topography showing that there was no change in grade, almost 1 or 2 inches at most in certain areas, but for the most part he kept the topography the way it was.
Did your client fill any of the property?
I'm sorry?
Did your client put any fill in the property?
Did he
bring any
Did your
fill to
client
the
bring any
property?
He did bring in fill towards because he removed the septic tank, the existing septic tank that collapsed. He did the deck area in where he removed the deck and the deck and the pool patio that surrounded the pool. When he removed that, he did bring in fill for certain areas over there, and then a lot of it was tilled and regrading, just kind of leveling out the land.
How much fill did he bring in?
That I do not know.
That would be helpful to get that figure. How many cubic yards of fill did he bring in?
I do believe the owner is on the Zoom, so he is able to.
Because bringing in fill, you're supposed to also show a chain of custody of where that fill came from.
Right.
It's important to know. It wasn't brought from someplace that could have potentially had something contaminating it that's going to now take over out of that's laid there. So don't bring any more fill.
So, as mentioned, we've been trying to work with Marty in terms of trying to come up with some sort of solution. The recommendations, the advice that he made with the sketches that he had is sort of, it's not really feasible for what my client is looking to build, especially a home in this area where he's on the waterfront. You would want to have a view of the water. Marty's suggestion is setting the house back, puts his house behind his neighbor's house. And what my client is requesting is to be able to just build his house in line with the house to the south of him. Let me see, with that, and then, as mentioned, we are willing to work with the Conservation Board, right? Trying to come to some sort of agreement. We spent weeks with the DEC and doing the same thing, trying to come with some sort of, compromise as to, because I know that some revegetation needs to happen, and we made a suggestion with the DEC board. They came back with different suggestions, and we're willing to work with you in the same. And then, so do you have any questions?
No, but I did want to say something to you. We go by Chapter 325, and in Chapter 325, they designate certain setbacks. And those setbacks are made from the wetlands, not from where your neighbor's house is. So that's where we're going. Just so you understand, that's what we're coming from.
Right. Right. We understand that. And which is why we wanted to come in from the board and ask relief from that, because meeting those setbacks really pushes the house further back. The alternative option that my client would really would be just to keep the existing house and keep renovating it until he gets to the house that he wants, which is really not a logical way of approaching this project either. But I do understand that you do have setbacks for a reason.
Keeping the existing house and doing renovations to it, make sure that the renovations don't require a building permit, otherwise they still need to come before us.
Right.
So even renovating the house in place doesn't absolve them from getting permits.
Have you read Chapter 325?
It's been a while, but yes, I did.
Okay. In Chapter 325, there are certain standards after you met. And if those standards are met, and there are other conditions too for meeting the standards for issuance of a permit, we're going to have to look at all those to, when you talk about looking for relief, that's really not the language of 325. The language is mitigation. So our starting place is, if you can meet the standards, then meet the standards. If you don't want to meet the standards, well, then what do you want to do, and what mitigation can you offer to offset the impacts of that change? So that's the kind of language, that's the kind of approach that we take on an application such as this.
Right, which is why we were proposing to, where the current wetland body is, come in 15 feet And
It's the wetland line.
the wetland line.
325 does not talk about a wetland body. It talks about a wetland line. It's the
Okay.
wetland line we take a measurement from. Structures, the standard is structures should be 100 feet from the wetland line, from the nearest wetland line. Your structure is 30 feet, 31 feet. That's a problem. So if that's what you want, then what mitigation can you offer? Now, you can't do this right now, I understand that, but I want to just give you some of the way we look at this and how we think about this. But I just want to speak to you so you could move to the same language that 325 speaks, because that's what we speak. But when you finish, I want Marty to speak about what his experience is on this property and what his advice is for this, to this board on environmental matters.
Okay. So,
Anything else?
no, that's it for now.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe you want to look
Good
at it.
evening, Maurice, Chief
Got them
Environmental
both down there.
Analyst for the.
This is one of those drawings, maybe?
So I was somewhat surprised by the applicant's statement that the existing house or foundation is being retained. The plans that have been provided call for a complete redevelopment of this property. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated March 24, 2025. It's a 7-page report. I recommend that all board members read it thoroughly, as it gives a complete accounting of the activities related to this application. My recollection is that I may have met with the landowner even prior to his purchase and impressed upon him the constraints of this property and that any new home would have to be shifted further landward. But that's neither here nor there. We're looking at the current application. There was quite a lot that occurred at this property without requisite wetland permits. As indicated on the survey, I had flagged the wetland boundaries on April 30th, 2024. And the flags were at the site. And very soon thereafter, very extensive area of wetlands were filled. The fill appears to be anywhere from a foot to 2 feet deep. Whereas if you look at the long history of the property, that there may have been a maintained lawn there. That area had recovered to tidal wetlands vegetation, very diverse, valuable native vegetation. It was very low, but it was coming in well. And that entire area of recovering wetlands was filled without the landowner checking with the town. My wetland line had been surveyed, so I'm not really understanding how the applicant can indicate that the landowner thought he could then go into that area, mow that area, and change that area, and add soil to establish lawn. So the initial enforcement actions were taken as a consequence of the unauthorized fill that was placed on the seaward side of the property, and also the unauthorized demolition of a prior pool patio. Pool equipment shed was destroyed. This pool has not been used for a very long time. I can't think of anyone that would want to look to try and repair and reutilize the pool. The pool was built many years ago in wetlands. It's all wet around where the pool is. So the current house is a small house. It's not FEMA compliant. It's in a restricted flood zone. So the new house, of course, has to be FEMA compliant. So there's very little opportunity to use any of that existing home. I know that some of the original plans that were submitted appeared to show that they were going to try and use that home. The final plans that were submitted, as shown in the survey, last dated May 5, 2024, that were received January 31st of this year. It doesn't show that the existing home is being retained. It shows a complete redevelopment plan for this property. Very large house would be built, very large pool, covered and open verandas. The applicant apparently was ignoring the notice of violation of stop work orders because he then proceeded to bring significant quantities of fill onto the property on the landward side of the house. And today there's a newly constructed driveway on the landward side of the house. All those activities by code require wetland permits prior to commencement. That being said, as we have a plan for very extensive redevelopment, that can all be addressed and changed and reclaimed where necessary. The applicant is looking for very excessive relief from the required wetland construction and buffer setbacks. And that, of course, is all detailed in my report. Just to point to some of those setbacks, now this is developed property. If the applicant has read the code, he would know that new construction on developed property has to be 100 feet landward of wetlands. The existing house, which is a partial two-story, only has a footprint of 1,675 square feet. The new dwelling would have a footprint of 4,798.2 square feet. So we're looking at the building of a much larger residence, which is fine if you've got a deep piece of property and you have an ability to meet the requirements of the code in terms of wetland construction setbacks and wetland buffers. But the applicant is not appearing to try and accomplish that. He's indicated that he had very lengthy meetings with the DEC, which is great, but the state tidal wetland regulations, as this board knows, are radically different from the local wetland regulations. They're a lot less stringent and protective of wetlands. And that's the reason why this town had adopted the present wetland law in 1993. So, and this is all detailed in my report. If you look at the new residence, while the new residence would be 75 feet from wetlands rather than 100 feet, if you then look at the accessory improvements, you look at the rear open veranda, which would only be 27 feet landward of wetlands. The covered veranda would only be 57.4 feet. The in-ground swimming pool would be 30.8 feet. There is a stepped retaining wall that's being proposed at 24 feet. This is falls far shy of what the requirements are by code. So when I get an application like this, what I first like to do is get a sense of what the applicant's needs and desires are in terms of a new home. And so in keeping with that protocol, and keeping with my desire to always try and work with applicants to give them the types of improvements in the square footage that they're looking for, I simply looked at whether or not we could take the footprints as shown on the survey and just shift them further landward in order to comply with the wetland construction and buffer setbacks as per code. And what I actually found is that could be accomplished. And just this is a property that has frontage on a Phelps Creek. It has an extensive tidal marshland, and we have the recovering wet tidal meadow that was filled and needs to be reclaimed. Just to give you a sense of the value of this area, here's a photo that was recently taken of a bald eagle that resides in the area and is a resident of the creek and the expansive tidal wetlands along the creek, including those on this property. So, although the applicant alluded not only in emailed communications to me, but in his testimony today that they had very extensive meetings with DEC and they worked out restoration concept that the DEC is amenable to. I have yet to actually receive a restoration plan for the damaged wetlands, which is somewhat unfortunate because the sooner we can get into a filled area and uncover that fill, the better chance that some of the existing vegetation that is under that fill will come back on its own rather than having to bring in a lot of nursery plants. So there is a great need for the applicant to come forward with a restoration plan for the fill wetlands. That would help considerably at this time in review of the application. So what I did is I looked at the entirety of what the applicant is seeking to build here. Look at the home with the attached garage, the various verandas, the pool, the driveway, and looked at whether or not there's a way to give them all that and comply with the code by simply shifting that further landward. And you can actually do that. The first sketch that I'll hand up shows that there is an ability to shift the exact home, the exact layout, further landward. Yes, you would reduce the size of the driveway, but still have an extensive driveway and comply with the minimum 100 wetland construction setback and minimum required 75-foot buffer. Acknowledging that there is a pre-existing home on this property, and of course that home is not grandfathered. And on the other side of the coin, of course, this is residentially zoned, so he has a right to build a new residence. But acknowledging that there was a small residence on the property for many years. Residence is still there. The deck has been removed. Pool patio has been taken out. The pool is not functional. I said, well, and knowing, because I had heard from the applicant that he was somewhat concerned about shifting the home further landward in a manner that would restrict his panoramic views, because understand that the applicant has broad open view of the creek on this property. There are no trees or anything. So while, yes, there are homes on the abutting property, he still has a tremendous view of the creek. But acknowledging all that, I looked at what was approved on the abutting properties and the improvements on the property to the south, and my report detailed that were authorized at a time when there was not this change in the tidal regimes in advance of wetlands that we're seeing on the subject properties. So the buffer was further seaward. It was less in width than the 75 feet, and the wetlands were further seaward. And of course, and it's all detailed in my report, my recollection was that was not a permit for complete redevelopment of the property to the south, was something different. But the second sketch that I provided to the applicant would give the applicant the exact plan that he wants, allow for a construction setback of 15 less than what's required, thereby giving him an 85-foot setback with yet a 75-foot buffer that would be contiguous with the 75-foot buffer on the property. And the way, partly how I arrived at that was to look at the alignment of the residence to the north, and I'll take a close look at that again. But that would better align the improvements on this property with the residential improvements on the subject property. Now, I understand that the applicant may not want to be further landward than the existing residents to the south, but the code mandates that when you come in for redevelopment like this, that you have to comply with certain setbacks. At some point, that property to the south is going to come in for redevelopment again. And at that time, in all likelihood, the wetlands will be flagged as more extensive, and that house will get shifted back too. So if you look at many of the homes along Phillips Creek, you'll note that they're far landward on the property. Many of those homes did receive permits from this board at compliant setbacks. There are some homes that are significantly closer, and some of those homes predate the effective date of the wetlands law. Unfortunately, I didn't receive the applicant's response to my report. I was not even aware that there was an ability on the town webpage when you have a pending application to respond when you're the owner of that property through some portal. So I never received those comments. In fact, because there was a lot of back and forth that went on between me and the architect and the landowner since we had first met, I fully anticipated that he was going to respond in short order to my report. So I found it somewhat odd that I didn't receive a response. I'm happy now that I do have a response. It's unfortunate that rather than that being emailed and dropped off, and I don't really understand why that was done, because both the architect and the owner has been in to see me at the counter many, many times. But that being said, I'm happy to read through that report thoroughly. Of course, tonight at this late hour, I'm not in a position to go through that report and respond to that report. And if the plans have changed again, or so that the landowner is now looking at retaining part of this existing house and elevating it so it's FEMA compliant, well, that has to be shown on the drawing. That's not what's shown on the current drawing. Yes, some of the original drawings did call for reuse of that structure. But I think that all changed when the applicant found out that that structure was not at a FEMA compliant elevation. And it's an old house. It's likely not very functional as part of a new energy efficient, larger FEMA compliant house. But if the current plan that is before me that says nothing, it doesn't even show the footprint of the existing house, nor say that the existing house is being retained, these plans are wrong, then they need to be corrected and resubmitted to me so that I'm reviewing the right project plans. So I have no issues with construction of a large residence on this property, particularly because it's a deep property. It's absolutely critical that the damaged wetlands, that the fill be removed and the area be wholly restored. It's absolutely critical that we establish at least a 75-foot wide naturally vegetated buffer on this property. So this application is yet going to require a lot of work, as was said. I think the next step would be for me to take the time to review the applicant's response, for the applicant to provide greater clarity as to whether or not the survey I'm working off of, whether or not this is the correct plan now, whether or not the plans have since changed, or whether or not they're going to change again, because I want to make sure I'm reviewing accurate plans. It might also be helpful to the board to show the footprint of the existing residence overlaid on this. Now, I know at my request, the applicant attempted to show both existing and proposed contours. I'll admit I need to take a closer look at that. I'm hoping it's accurate, so there may be a need for some adjustments in that. I remember one of the discussions I had with the applicant was early on when he talked about keeping the existing house and maybe expanding the house. They said, well, because of the close proximity to wetlands, you need to look at expanding the house on the landward side, and the pool would need to be positioned on the landward side of the house, because to try and put the pool on the seaward side of the existing home is just too close to wetlands. I understand that the applicant wants to have a pool on the seaward side of the house. It makes sense to do that. And that's why it makes a lot more sense to shift the new residents further back on this property. So in doing so, aside from the applicant's concerns about possible screening of a panoramic view from the house, there is certainly an opportunity on this property for the applicant to get the exact footprint that he's looking at, but to shift this further back. So I don't know whether or not the applicant has a wetlands restoration plan that can be forwarded to me in short order. And again, I need to get clarity as to whether or not this is the final plan for now. I need to review his response to my advisory report from March 24. If you look at the report, although the initial application was submitted some time ago, there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of communications, a lot of different plans submitted. The engineered septic plan, which I had requested from very early on, was not submitted till the latter part of March or sometime in March, and that's why the advisory report could not be completed until March 24. Thank you.
I have a question. I actually have two questions. One is, you have an explanation of why fill was brought in and a driveway was constructed?
So the driveway,
After Marty had flagged the wetlands?
so my understanding with the driveway was the front part of the driveway towards the curb cut and towards the street was not within the wetlands jurisdiction, and we did apply for permits, and we did get permits for that driveway, the curb cut for that front part.
It's only how you get into the property. It's not any driveway on the property. The curb cut is just where it exits onto the road.
Right.
So I don't know what other configuration the driveway was changed, but okay, anyway, go ahead.
Right. And then as far as the fill goes, the owner could answer to the amount of fill that was brought in. The you
Well,
know
we would want to know the amount of fill. Uh, Before you discuss the fill, I just want to read something from one of your neighbors, all right? And it says, since 2024, 2025, grade changes, I have documented new pooling along the shared boundary during heavy and storm surge events, an issue not observed in the previous 2.5 decades of my full-time residency. Prior to the subject's elevation changes, stormwater and surges had receded from the west to the east. After the elevation changes, the stormwater and surges seem to pool up in spots, and what does recede does so from the north to the south due to the higher elevation blocking the tidal path. I'm concerned what your client plans to do about these changes to his neighbor's property in relationship to the fill. Marty has actually pointed out to you what you actually need to get this application moving. But one of my big concerns is the fill and what it's doing to the neighboring properties. So I'd appreciate if that was something you would delve into as well.
Absolutely. I'll have a further discussion with the client. I'll have further discussion with the client and go over what he did with the fill and how much fill he brought in, and we'll address and then address any issues that the neighbor has in terms of pooling and everything. So I guess we could get a report of that, what he's saying, and just so that we can.
Oh, this is public knowledge.
In response to what Marty said earlier, just so you know, we did submit the revegetation plan and everything back in January 17, 2025. Plans were dropped off to the town. Mike, the owner, did drop it off, and I did email Marty, which he didn't respond to, by the way, and the email stated, regarding 24 Sunset Avenue, East Quogue, we have met with the DEC numerous times via Zoom conference regarding DEC wetland permit application. Please find the attached site plan that has been agreed upon between the owner and the DEC supervisor, biologist, and analyst, et cetera, et cetera. So there is an email, and that went unanswered since January 17. And there are other numerous emails that have gone unanswered. So we've been trying to work with Marty. We just don't get response back from him. The first time we had any sort of design suggestion or any assistance was that sketch that he gave us 2 days before the preliminary hearing that we had here. All right. Prior to that, all our meetings, every time we met with Marty and every time we submitted drawings or dropped off drawings at the town, the only thing he would talk about is how much the neighbors are complaining about this property, that we could put the pool at the front of the property in the front yard, and those were the only things that he would really talk to us about. So it was a very difficult, just trying to get some sort of feedback to say, hey, there's multiple emails, and it does say it in the rebuttal here, saying that, hey, we asked you, what do you think of this plan? What do you think of this plan? Not once did he say, all he would say is, oh, you need to revegetate, you're going to have to restore the land. But he would not talk about the setbacks. He would not talk about anything pertaining to Chapter 325. All right, so this has been going on for since the time that the owners have purchased this property. We've been trying to figure out what we can do and what we can't do, to a point where we just had to submit, and then even then it's been kind of pulling teeth, just trying to get some sort of response, to only finding out 2 days before the preliminary hearing, this is what you can and can't do.
You have to pardon me, but that does not sound, I'm not being defensive here, but that does not sound like Marty's behavior. I haven't seen that or heard of that in
some odd
years I'm on the board.
So we have the emails to show that it hasn't been responded to. We put in a timeline and a calendar of when we submitted dropped up drawings, and it's in that report that I gave to Marty. And in terms of stop work order, every time I've dealt with stop work orders, there's usually a red sticker or posting put on the house or on a post or something. There was no stickers ever put on the house. There is a house still there. He could have just put a red sticker and say stop work order. From my understanding, the owner has never received any notices, mailings, or tickets regarding or violations regarding stopping stop work order. Right. So it's sort of like, if you don't tell him and if you don't put a sticker telling him that there's a stop work order, then he doesn't know that there's a stop work order.
There's an email here from the owner of 17 Sunset Avenue that they saw a stop work order posted, but that didn't stop you from bringing in truckload after truckload of fill, maneuvering onto the neighbor's property to get onto yours and crushing one of the septic areas and causing damage, getting stuck in the mud of the driveway across the street. So this neighbor is saying there were stop work orders posted and that they were ignored by the vehicles bringing truckload after truckload of fill, even on Sundays.
I think we're not
They
going to
have
make
the time,
any
so,
more progress tonight.
Yeah, you're going to have to look.
Let's put an end to this now. There's been some communication issues. We'll just call it that. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Marty needs to look at this response. There needs to be more back and forth to understand, and it needs to be clear. It'd be good for you to make it absolutely clear, what do you want to do on this property? When I'm listening to this tonight, I don't know what you want to do. There are too many plans. Let's get one plan. This is what you want to do. And then we'll start there and move from there. We can't look at several plans simultaneously. It doesn't make any sense because everything's interrelated. It looks to me like there needs to be a clear plan put forth. There needs to be a restoration plan for the fill added without a permit. That generally that all has to come out, and plantings have to go in. Based on what I've seen the aerials, it looks like there are no plantings there now. That's been cleaned, that's been sterilized. But there should be wetland or buffer plants there because most of that is in the buffer zone. Some of that cleared area may actually be in the wetlands. So all that needs to be put forth on a plan. And then we can look at that and make adjustments if necessary. So let's adjourn and let's adjourn this to a later date. But in between, there needs to be some communication. If you don't get a response from Marty, I'd say email him again or call him or something. I know in my own life, sometimes I don't get emails. Sometimes they go to the junk letter file. Sometimes they just get lost somewhere. And so stuff happens. I don't know what happened here. We can't undo what's happened.
But you'll have copies of staff sketch on what they believe is the most appropriate rendition of your plan, and you should probably try to address that in your renovation rather than continuing to push forward on the one that you know is not being looked upon favorably. Just look at what staff is applying the law to and saying, we don't think that what you're asking for is appropriate, but according to the law and the setbacks are from wetlands, this is what we feel would be approvable. Start with that.
Morty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. Very early on, I impressed upon the landowner that if the property was going to be redeveloped, the house would have to be shifted significantly further landward. It's really unclear to me as to whether the landowner or the architect didn't take the time to review the code and review the required standards. But I certainly had told him that he wasn't happy about that. That was my recollection. But I said we had a very stringent wetland law in place. And that's why I said if you were going to keep this house, the pool would have to go on the roadside. The house, the addition would have to be on the roadside as well. When I do an advisory report, I do a very exhaustive review of everything that we have on record. And I tried to go over every single email that I had. And the one email where there's discussion about meetings with DEC and there's an attachment, the attachment was not a revegetation plan. It was another copy of a former site plan that had been submitted. But I'll look at the applicant's comments, but you'll see in my report, I try to give you a very clear history of what occurred here in terms of emailed communications back and forth. If I missed one, my apologies. But I don't treat these applications lightly. I try and do the most honest job I can in terms of accounting of the history of the application. The application took some time. The applicant's plans got changed. It was unclear to me as to what the applicant was doing. I think very early on, I asked for a survey. I don't know that I got that till later. So, I even now standing here, I think that survey is what the current project plan is. But, I heard some testimony about keeping the house again. So I need to get 100% clarity as to what the plan is. If that's not the correct plan, then the applicant should, as soon as possible, get me a correct plan. And the plan has to show the dimensions, has to show the wetland setbacks, so that I don't have to spend an incredible amount of time reviewing these project plans. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, we don't need a survey for these plans necessarily at this stage. But the most important part of the plan is clarity. We look at, and the law calls for setback lines. So for the structures that you want to build, make sure there's a setback line that's, it should be as close to scale as possible, but it has to be an accurate setback line.
Can I I just wanted to offer that this survey is great in terms of showing all the dimensions, showing the closest wetland setbacks. Some of the earlier plans are more difficult to work with. So it's actually best for you to continue to work with the survey if there are any changes you need to make to it. If not, just let me know. That's fine. So actually, this survey is great.
Okay.
It's much easier on a property like this to work off a survey and to work off the site plan drawings.
Okay, and then there has to be some communication for emails that you say were sent, but Marty says was not received. So work on that in between now and the next time we get together. We have time on June 25th. There's nobody there. It can be all you. Does that work? Oh,
That could work.
Before I do that, I forgot to ask if there's anybody in the public who'd like to speak on this application. There is no one here. Is there anyone?
Yes, I would like to speak as the owner.
Okay, I'm hearing something there.
There's some feedback, though.
Peter, is there someone on that wants to speak?
Yes, I believe is the owner or something that he said
Okay.
before.
Okay.
Yes, the landowner of the property.
Okay, you may speak.
So I purchased the property back in July of 24. Met with Marty a few times prior to purchasing the property. I was provided with a zoning analysis from InterScience regarding what the property was able to be done and what was not able to be done. Hired an expediter to go and do everything that we needed to do to provide us the correct information. Hired a closing attorney and had a title search done. In all those documents, nothing was pulled up and nothing was shown regarding any of a revegetation that needed to be done on the property for previous violations from previous homeowners that owned this home. The most recent previous owner was the owner at 22 Sunset, John Danzy. He purchased it from another homeowner that was actively maintaining the grass in the backyard. In the actual marshland was being mowed. And then on the inside of the chain link fence, that was continually being maintained. When we did a bunch of the research on it, nothing was shown on here. The DEC had further told us after we met with them a bunch of times, they further told us that the reason that the revegetation violations were never submitted, I guess, was because the town never submitted them properly to be shown as a revegetation plan. So it would have gotten pulled up in a title search or a closing attorney doing his research or any other InterScience doing it in their zoning analysis. After that, we closed on the property. I had went down to go meet with Marty to formally present a plan that we were looking to do for the new home, showing the existing footprint with an overlay of the new home, showing the swimming pool coming out of the wetlands, mitigating any of the wetland issues that current swimming pool would be causing, putting the swimming pool in the back of the house, away from the wetlands. Marty told me that the pool was grandfathered in. It's also on paperwork from InterScience that it's grandfathered in. It was also shown in the listing that pool is currently grandfathered in, but we didn't want to leave the pool in that existing area because it's so far behind the house. We wanted to put it closer to the back of the house. When I showed Marty the plan that we were looking to do, I got a huge amount of backlash from Marty and screamed at me from the first time I met with him. And I don't know if it was like a joke or not, but I showed him the stuff that we wanted to do, and he literally yelled at me and then walked away from his podium area and apologized and said, "Let's start over," and said that everybody that is looking for relief is the people that ruin the environment, and went on and on and on about how I'm looking to ruin the environment by removing a swimming pool that's in the wetlands and put it out of the wetlands behind the house. His only suggestion was to put it in the front yard, and I strictly instructed him that we couldn't put it in the front yard because all the utilities were coming in through the front yard between septic, electric, water, propane system, communication. Everything was coming in from the front yard, and we couldn't put a pool in there because it's a non-conforming lot. It's under 150 feet. It's only 104 feet wide. So we couldn't put a swimming pool in there, have a driveway, and have all the utilities in the front. It would just be impossible. And then he told me to disconnect the garage from the house and move it away and put the swimming pool in the front of the house. So you would have a swimming pool basically in front of your front door, which is extremely odd, which would also require a variance because nobody on that road has a front yard swimming pool. I don't even know how you would fence in a front yard swimming pool with putting fences in your front yard around your front door. Based on that, I had asked Marty what other suggestions he hadn't give us any other further suggestions. I had asked the architect to just submit something to him just so we can get on the wetland permit board. So we submitted that in the later part of September. I didn't hear anything back from Marty for months. So far out that it went into March that I actually went down to the town to speak with him again. And he didn't even give me the time of day to speak or ask any questions. He literally walked up to his podium and said, "All right, yeah, it's great. I see you. I'll get to you," and just walked away. It takes me 2 hours to drive there and almost an hour to wait there. And I couldn't even speak to him for 5 minutes about anything that was going on and why it was in such a huge delay. After we did that, we got some kind of communication back from him, and he then put it on the board for March. I think it was the later part of March or April. I forgot what the exact date was. But being on that part, we had met with the DEC. They had recommended to us to revegetate the backyard and mitigate any of the wetland loss that was from previous homeowners. So when we came in, we provided them the whole entire wetland preservation plan to the DEC. They basically showed us what they wanted, showed us what plants they were requesting. We gave them a plan back. This is about 4 or 5 meetings worth. We gave them the plan back. They agreed to it. They approved the permit. We submitted that to Marty. In the interim, we got our septic plan submitted to the Board of Health, got that approved, submitted that to Marty. So he had said that he couldn't provide a report based on the septic plan not being submitted, which is totally untrue because that septic plan was submitted back in January. So he's saying that he couldn't do that because it was only submitted in March, which is, again, not true. And after we didn't hear from him for months and months and months, myself and the architect would go down to the town or email him and call him, and we'd get zero response back. We have emails showing that based on comments from a stop work order, we were cleaning up the back of the property. There was a bunch of overgrown brush and shrubs around a pool that was non-native plants. We removed those. We started to remove a dilapidated patio that was overtaken by weeds and debris. This property's been vacant for, according to the neighbors, 20 or 30 years and has been an exorbitant amount of time that's just been sitting, and many of the neighbors have dumped debris on it. There's been landscape debris. There was floated up debris. There was a rotted floating dock and part of the dock that was there in the actual marsh wetlands. We removed that part of it. The chain link fence was sitting there half knocked over and rusty. We removed that. On the left side of the property where it abuts the 22 Sunset, there was 3 layers of chain link fence with debris growing all in it, vines, poison ivy, thorn bushes. We removed the 3 chain link fences that were in between all the debris. We removed numerous dumpsters of construction debris that was all over the property. There was broken trees, knocked down trees. We removed that. Didn't realize you needed a permit to remove a patio that doesn't require a permit to be installed. There was a rotted deck that was sunk. There was holes in it. Again, trees growing through it. There's a bunch of debris in the back of it. We started to remove the deck. We started to rototill the back of the area to provide a new area for the lawn. There was a lot of debris in the backyard that we removed as well. We got a code enforcement showed up one time. One of my employees was there in a skid steer, asked him what he was framing. There was one person, one skid steer on the job site, one pickup truck. There was no framing tools. He asked why the neighbors called and said he was framing stuff, and my employee invited him in and said, you can look around. There's no new materials here. There's no construction materials. There's no framing crew. There's no nail guns. We don't even have electric on the property. And the guy literally looked for 2 seconds and said, nope, I don't hear any nail guns. Continue doing what you're doing, as he was cleaning up the front yard with cleaning up the overgrown trees and brush that was knocked down and just debris that was in the front yard as well. So that was the one time we got communication from them. I got a letter in the mail to my home residence that I'm currently in Miller Place. That was the first time it was a notice of non-permitted work, and I think it was wetland. I don't remember the exact terminology, but we responded back to that, and right after that was done, that was in the beginning to middle part of September, we had filed a wetland permit and started to work on all the process with Marty. After that, there was no talk of anything else but submitting new documents. We submitted all the surveys, the topographies, everything that he had requested from us, and continued doing everything else as far as responding back to, there was a code enforcement guy that showed up and said he was going to put a stop work order if we continued working. And I told him, what are you requesting us to stop doing? And he said, oh, well, you're only allowed to do landscaping work. I said, well, that's all that we're doing here today anyway. We're doing landscaping work and installing a construction entrance. And the code enforcement gave us a ticket for non-permitted work in a apron. We had went to the highway department that exact day and asked them, what do we have to do this? And they said, no, you're required to install a construction entrance. That ticket's non-valid. You should probably start working on doing your permit anyway, because it's better to do it now than do it later. So we applied for the permit and did all that. And after that, we've just been at a total standstill and paying property tax and paying an exorbitant amount on a hard money loan just to close on this property because no banks would give a mortgage on a home that was non-livable on the inside because it was gutted from the previous owner. So I'm dealt with an expensive piece of property that Marty has told us that we should remove the house on its entirety and to just pick it up and move it forward, which I can't incur the cost of $300,000 to remove a home, remove all the existing footings and start over from brand new fresh when we're looking at extending and reusing a majority of the foundation's footprint, which is shown on the architectural plans that were submitted. It shows an overlay of the existing foundation. It shows an overlay of the new foundation that would be added to the existing. And it shows an overlay of the existing home and a new home that would be going onto that as we were using certain parts of walls and beams and framing, and then obviously elevating to go up to make it FEMA compliant. Everything else has been submitted to him, and it's just this process has been a very tolling process to continue on without having any light at the end of the tunnel. And we don't really have much back from him besides saying put a front yard pool in, and then we got a little bit of response towards the last meeting, which put us on, I guess, this board meeting as far as that goes. So that's just where we're at right now.
All right. So we need to adjourn this and try to get some things together and have a concise presentation next time.
I didn't hear you. You cut out for that last few seconds. Could you repeat that, please?
We need to adjourn this and put a concise presentation together and a plan together for next time on June 25th.
Do you have anything earlier than June 25th?
Excuse me?
Nothing earlier.
We've been working on this for almost a year now. It's just we have literally zero progress on it.
There are already hearings on the other dates, unfortunately, so we have to, the only thing that's not, you would be the only ones on June 25th, but the other hearings have, the other dates have hearings on them already.
While you're on Zoom,
Yes,
sir, could you tell us how much fill you actually brought into the property?
So we brought in 60 yards of fill from an existing swimming pool that was across the street, or not existing, but a new swimming pool that was across the street that got dug. It was on a diagonal. I'm not sure of the exact number. I believe it was like 13 possibly. There's a home that's directly across from us, and there's a home that's directly to the right, more towards the end of the road. I'm not too familiar with the number of it, but they had a swimming pool that was dug, and I walked over and asked if they can dump the fill over there, and they brought me the fill, and we spread it around a lot of the low areas that were in the property, from front yard for the new driveway and around the newer part of the front part of the house where the engineers requested a 1,200 yards of fill to be brought in for the new septic system.
So then number one, please don't do any more work within 200 feet of the wetlands until we get a plan together.
We haven't did anything in the last probably 5 months. And everything that we have done in the last previous time has been on the front yard of, we planted new trees and we planted new bushes along the property line and just basically put in landscaping.
And next, we'll adjourn this to June 25th. In the meantime, we just need to have some communication to make sure both the office and your your program are meshed so that the communications are going both ways. It sounds like we're missing some communications. And then we'll try to work all this out next meeting.
Right. Yeah, I would appreciate that. I mean, there's nothing more that I'd like to get this done as soon as I can. So, I mean, I would call Marty when he didn't answer, and I would just get no feedback. I mean, it took me months to actually finally hear back from him. I actually went down to the town and spoke to another person about the lengthiness of it, and that's only when it started to push it ahead and get into the March meeting.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I was told in the beginning it takes usually 4 months to get anything onto the board, and it took us almost 8 months.
All right. Is there a motion to?
Motion to adjourn to June 25th, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Any more? Coming over this way?
Now we have to go to advisory, right?
Advisory is next. Now, on the,
That will take a few seconds. Probably somebody suing us.
is there anything of significance on any of the 4 advisory reports?
Yes, the first one is significant.
Okay, let's do that one. Shinnecock Commercial Fishing Dock Site Plan.
Yeah, this is a town application to put a monopole and a wireless telecommunications tower at the commercial fishing dock. The tower would be 100 feet high. There are several recommended comments on this. First is based on the environment division site assessment completed on Friday, April 25, 2025. There is major worry that proposed 100 feet tall monopole wireless communications tower will adversely impact scenic view sheds. Additionally, there's added concern that related radio frequency electromagnetic fields may interfere with wildlife orientation, particularly migratory songbirds, bats, and insects such as monarch butterflies and honeybees. Second, practicable alternatives to building a new monopole need to be evaluated, including whether existing tall structures such as the Ponquart Bridge and the Ponquart Beach Pavilion or other towers such as those at the Shinnecock Coast Guard Station and at Shinnecock County Park West can be repurposed for the intended use and function. And lastly, recurrent coastal flooding and dune overwash, as well as related road closures and deterioration of infrastructure, may put the proposed telecommunications facility at significant risk of damage and interruptions in service at this location. As such, other more secure locations need to be explored.
Motion to send those comments to the planning board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The next 3, I think we can avoid reading and just approve them. They look straightforward.
Okay.
Although I don't have a copy of the Eric one. What is that? What is that one about? Is it any,
Which one?
the Eric Shea Family Trust? That's not in this packet.
Can I get that on there?
Is it not in the packet?
No, it's not.
I'm sorry, I don't have the agenda with me.
I can pull it up, but it's definitely.
Yeah, I can speak to this one. There are no issues with this application. This is an oceanfront home in Southampton. It's right at the upper beach, and the landowner is simply looking to put in an elevator for physically challenged persons. It'll require some relief in terms of installation of new joists and pilings. It's all in the immediate restricted coastal erosion hazard area. House has been there for many years, and there are no issues with that.
Okay, is there a motion to approve all 3 ZBAs and send those documents to the ZBA?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The administrative wetland permits in your packets. Resolution conditional approval A 023022. Jerome Savadier, any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolve that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Shalom Savadier for the proposed project on the terms and conditions for the All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 024065 191 Highland LLC. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to 191 Highland LLC for the proposed project on the terms and conditions of forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 024072 Sergio Euro. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Sergio Euro for the proposed project for the terms and conditions of forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 024075 Kemp 15 LLC. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to Kemp 15 LLC for the proposed project by the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Preliminary review seat determination, A 024050 Timothy Field and Diane Field.
This application relates to an existing residentially developed property that's adjacent to freshwater and tidal wetlands associated with Stokes Polk Marsh. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated May 7, 2025. The applicant is proposing residential improvements which in their virtual entirety are compliant with required setbacks. They will be establishing a compliant covenanted restored buffer. So there is sufficient information. Make a determination on this application. Accordingly, the hearing requirement can be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing.
Second. Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-8E of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And before we go to the next application, I got to correct myself. I believe Shay was initially on the application, and then I saw that it was a referral. To me, it was not an advisory referral to this board. So I took it off the agenda, but somehow the former agenda got shared with you. So you can you can rescind your vote on the ZBA referral of Eric Shea Family Trust, because that was not a referral to this
A
board.
motion to amend.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
We'll let it slide this time, Marty.
A 024077 Colin Heffron, applicant request to postpone to May 28th.
Motion to postpone to May 28th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A opposed? A 025001 John P. Hall.
This is an application which seeks a wetland permit to elevate an existing home at Cold Spring Point with frontage on the Great Peconic Bay. There's a preliminary advisory report on file dated May 7, 2025. There are extensive decks that will need to be reconstructed at the height of the new finished first floor elevations. The applicant is amenable to maximizing the covenanted wetland preservation area and buffer so that it reaches from the bay to the seaward limit of the house. They've also agreed to comply with seasonal restrictions on construction in light of the area being string fenced for endangered shorebirds. So there is sufficient information to make a determination. As such, the public hearing requirement can be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing.
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-8 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution to approve modification, conditional approval, A 022038, Helmholtz.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to Cromwell's 119 Sand Dune LLC for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 024003, Mark Smith and others. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolve that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to Mort Cole and Heather Cole and Caldella 23 LLC for the proposed project on the terms and conditions of fourth hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? CB 17043, Michael Federico and Rosa Federico. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolve that a wetlands permit approval, resolve that a wetlands permit modification be issued to Michael Federico and Rosa Federico for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? CB 22003, the Dominique Levy Trust. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolve that a wetlands permit modification be issued to the Dominique Levy Gift Trust for the proposed project by the terms and conditions that set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? CB 22050, Attilo Soma and Mary Beth Soma. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolve that a wetlands permit modification be issued to Attila Leo Soma and Mary Beth Soma for the proposed project for the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to go into executive session for the purpose.
There's one more.
Oh, one more? Oh.
CB 23017, Tony Lipari.
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolve that a wetlands permit modification be issued to Tony Lipari for the proposed project for the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Enter executive session for the purposes of discussing litigation
Second.
And ending the meeting.
and ending the meeting immediately thereafter.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Peter is.
Okay, Peter,
Zoom-
you can go home.